The wind howled across the frozen wasteland of Xerion Prime, carrying crystals of ice that cut through the air like tiny knives. In the distance, towers of blue-white ice stretched toward the pale sky, their surfaces smooth and deadly. This was the home of the Glacian Empire, a race of beings who could control cold itself. Deep inside the largest ice tower, in a room made entirely of frozen walls, sat a young woman named Lyra Voss. She wore a thick suit that covered her entire body, leaving only her eyes visible through a special visor. The suit was not for warmth. It was to protect everyone else from her. Lyra had learned long ago that she was different from other Glacians. While her people could create ice and lower temperatures, Lyra's touch brought instant death. Every living thing she had ever touched froze solid in seconds, their life drained away completely. She was 23 years old and had never felt another person's skin against her own. The door to her chamber hissed open, and Commander Zex Caney stepped inside. He was a tall Glacian with silver skin and eyes like frozen lakes. He kept his distance from Lyra, as everyone did. "We have work for you today," Caney said in his cold voice. "3 prisoners from the Verdani system. They refused to tell us about their defense systems." Lyra closed her eyes and felt the familiar weight of sadness settle on her chest. "How many this time?" "As many as it takes," Caney replied. "You know, the rules. Touch them until they talk, or until they cannot talk anymore." She had heard these words hundreds of times before. The Glacian Empire used her as their perfect weapon. No one could resist the fear of her touch. Most prisoners told them everything after seeing just one demonstration of her power. Caney led her through the ice corridors to the interrogation chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the empty hallways. Guards pressed themselves against the walls. As she passed, their faces showing the same look everyone gave her. They saw her as a monster. The interrogation chamber was a large room with walls of clear ice. 3 plant-like creatures stood chained to the far wall. They were Verdani, with green skin that looked like bark and hair made of leaves. When they saw Lyra enter, their large eyes filled with terror. "Please," one of them said in broken Glacian language. "We have told you everything we know." Commander Caney walked to a control panel behind a protective barrier. "Show them what happens to liars," he ordered Lyra. She approached the first Verdani slowly. The creature tried to pull away, but the chains held him in place. Lyra raised her gloved hand, then stopped. "I do not want to do this," she said quietly. "You will do as ordered," Caney's voice boomed through the speakers. "Or you know what will happen to you." Lyra knew the threat was real. She had tried to refuse once before, years ago. They had locked her in a room so cold that even her ice-adapted body nearly died. She had learned that she was as much a prisoner as anyone else in this place. She pulled off her glove and reached toward the Verdani. The moment her bare finger touched his arm, frost spread across his green skin. His eyes went wide, then empty. In 3 seconds, he was completely frozen, dead. The other 2 Verdani began screaming. "Stop!" one of them cried. "We will tell you anything." But Caney was not satisfied. "Touch the second one. Make sure they understand we are serious." Lyra felt sick, but she had no choice. She touched the second Verdani and watched another life, and in seconds, the third prisoner collapsed to his knees, sobbing. "The defense grid has 47 stations," he said through his tears. "The main control is on the 3rd moon. The access codes change every 6 hours. Please, do not kill me." 2. Caney smiled coldly. "See? Your gift is very useful, Lyra. Take her back to her room." As the guards escorted her away, Lyra heard the 3rd Verdani being led to a different chamber. She knew they would probably kill him anyway, even though he had told them what they wanted to know. The Glacian Empire did not leave witnesses. Back. In her chamber, Lyra sat on her bed of ice and stared at her hands. Through the thick gloves, she could not see her fingers, but she knew what they looked like. Pale blue skin, just like any other Glacian. But these hands had killed more people than she could count. She thought about the first time her power had appeared. She was 7 years old, playing with her pet, a small, furry creature called a snow mouse. She had reached out to pet it, and it had died instantly, Her parents had screamed and called for the authorities. That was the last time she had lived in a normal home. The Glacian government had taken her away and trained her to be a weapon. They told her she was special, that her gift would help their empire grow strong. But Lyra knew the truth. She was not special. She was cursed. Over the years, she had killed members of every species the Glacians had encountered. The rock-like quartzoids, who lived for thousands of years, died just as quickly as anyone else when she touched them. The Lumini, beings made of pure energy, simply vanished when her power reached them. Even other Glacians could not survive. Her touch. Commander Caney visited her records room sometimes, showing her pictures of their victories. He would point to images of frozen armies and destroyed cities, telling her how her power had made it all possible. "You have helped us conquer 12 star systems," he would say with pride. But Lyra felt no pride. She felt only emptiness, like a hole in her chest that grew larger with each life she took. She had tried to understand her power, reading every book they allowed her to have. The scientists had studied her for years but could not explain why she was different. Other Glacians could control their ice abilities, turning them on and off as needed. Lyra's power was always active, always deadly. Sometimes she wondered what it would feel like to touch someone and not watch them die. She imagined holding hands with a friend or hugging someone she cared about. These were impossible dreams, but they were all she had. The door opened again, and a servant brought her evening meal. The servant wore thick protective gear and used long tools to place the food on her table. No words were spoken. Even the servants feared her. As she ate alone, Lyra looked out through the ice window at the frozen landscape beyond. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, were other worlds with other people living normal lives. They could touch each other, love each other, be close to each other. She envied them more than they could ever know. She finished her meal and prepared for sleep, removing her protective suit carefully. Even alone, she had to be careful not to touch anything living. There were no plants or animals in her room, nothing that could die from her touch. As she lay on her ice bed, Lyra stared up at the ceiling and made the same wish she made every night. She wished for someone, anyone, who could survive her touch. Someone who could see her as more than a weapon or a monster. Someone who could show her what it meant to be truly alive. She did not know that tomorrow, her wish would begin to come true in the most unexpected way. A ship from a distant world called Earth was already crossing into Glacian space, carrying passengers who were different from any species the Empire had ever encountered. And among them was someone who would change her life forever. But for now, Lyra simply closed her eyes and tried to sleep, unaware that her lonely existence was about to end. 3 days after the Verdani prisoners died, alarms began ringing throughout the Crystal Sanctum. Lyra sat up in her bed as red lights flashed through her chamber. She had never heard these particular alarms before. They sounded different from the usual prison alerts or training exercises. Commander Caney burst through her door, his silver face showing excitement. "We have captured something interesting," he said. "A ship from an unknown species. They call themselves humans." Lyra felt her stomach tighten. Another species meant more killing, more lives ended by her cursed touch. "How many?" she asked quietly. 30 of them, Caney replied. "They came from a planet called Earth, far beyond our mapped territories. Their ship crossed into our space 3 days ago. We disabled their vessel and brought them here." He activated a wall screen that showed the captured ship. It was smaller than Glacian vessels, with strange markings and a design Lyra had never seen before. The metal looked different too, not as cold and sharp as Glacian technology. "What do they look like?" Lyra asked. Caney smiled in a way that made her feel sick. "Similar to us in some ways, but they generate much more heat. Their body temperature is higher than any species we have encountered. Dr. Helen Cross is very interested in studying them." Lyra knew what that meant. Dr. Cross was the chief scientist who had studied her for years, trying to understand her deadly power. If she was interested in these humans, it meant they would become test subjects. "Bring me the first one," Caney ordered the guards. Let us see how quickly these warm-blooded creatures freeze. Lyra put on her protective suit with slow, heavy movements. Each piece of the thick clothing felt like another weight on her soul. She had hoped never to use her power again, but that hope had been foolish. The Glacian Empire would never let her rest. The first human was brought into the interrogation chamber. Lyra was surprised by what she saw. The creature looked similar to a Glacian, but with softer features and skin that seemed to glow with warmth. This one was female, with brown hair and eyes that showed intelligence and fear. My name is Dr. Lisa Park, the human said in surprisingly clear Glacian language. I am a medical officer. We meant no harm by entering your space. We were exploring, trying to make contact with new civilizations. Commander Caney spoke through the speakers. Your intentions do not matter. What matters is what you know about your species and your homeworld. Lyra, show her what happens to those who refuse to cooperate. Lyra walked toward Dr. Park slowly. The human watched her approach with calm eyes, not the terror that most species showed. This surprised Lyra. Did the human not understand what was about to happen? I am sorry, Lyra whispered as she reached out her hand. It is not your fault, Dr. Park replied softly. I can see in your eyes that you do not want to do this. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she remembered Caney's threats and touched the human's arm. Dr. Park froze instantly, just like all the others. Her kind eyes became empty and her warm skin turned cold and blue. Another life ended by Lyra's cursed touch. Interesting, came Dr. Cross's voice through the speakers. The freezing process took 2.3 seconds, slightly longer than with other species. Bring in the next one. They brought in a male human next. This one was younger, with dark skin and muscles that suggested he worked with his hands. He looked at Dr. Park's frozen body and then at Lyra with sad understanding. My name is Carlos Rodriguez, he said. I fix things on our ship. I have a wife and 2 children back home. Their names are Maria, and the little ones are Ana and Diego. Lyra felt tears form in her eyes. The human was telling her about his family, making himself real to her instead of just another victim. She had never heard a prisoner do this before. Please, she whispered, do not make this harder. I forgive you, Carlos said simply. You are not the evil one here. When Lyra touched him, he died just as quickly as Dr. Park. But his words stayed with her, echoing in her mind. 2 humans had shown her kindness even as they faced death. This had never happened before. More humans were brought in over the next hour. Each one died the same way, frozen solid by her touch. But each one also spoke to her with understanding instead of hate. They seemed to see that she was as much a victim as they were. Finally, the guards brought in their last prisoner for the day. This one was different from the others. He was tall and strong, with light brown hair and eyes the color of Earth's sky. Unlike the others, he showed no fear at all when he saw the frozen bodies of his crew members. I am Captain Jake Morrison, he said, looking directly at Lyra. I was in command of the exploration vessel New Horizon. These people died under my protection, and I am responsible for their deaths. Commander Caney's voice crackled through the speakers. This one is their leader. Make his death slow, Lyra. Let him suffer for bringing his people into our territory. Lyra approached Captain Morrison, expecting him to show fear or anger. Instead, he continued to look at her with steady, calm eyes. There was something in his gaze that she had never seen before. It was not pity or terror. It was recognition, as if he truly saw her as a person. What is your name? He asked quietly. The question surprised her so much that she stopped walking. No prisoner had ever asked her name before, Lyra, she said without thinking. Lyra, he repeated, and somehow the way he said it made her name sound beautiful instead of cursed. That is a lovely name. On my world, it is the name of a constellation, a group of stars that form a pattern in the night sky. She had never heard anything so wonderful. Her name was connected to stars, to light in the darkness. For a moment, she almost forgot where she was and what she was supposed to do. "Touch him," Kaney's voice roared through the speakers. Lyra reached out her hand, expecting to watch another good person die because of her curse. Captain Morrison did not pull away or close his eyes. He watched her face as her bare finger touched his hand. The moment their skin made contact, Lyra felt something she had never experienced before. Cold flowed from her into him, just as it always did. Frost formed on his skin where she touched him. But something was wrong. The frost stopped spreading after a few inches. Captain Morrison's skin grew cold, but he did not freeze solid. Lyra stared in shock as the human remained standing, still alive, still breathing. His hand was cold where she touched it, but the rest of him was warm. The frost on his skin began to melt away. "That is quite a handshake you have got there," Captain Morrison said with a small smile. The interrogation chamber fell completely silent. Even the hum of the machinery seemed to stop. Lyra looked at her hand still touching his and could not believe what she was seeing. For the first time in her life, she had touched another living being without killing them. "Impossible, Doctor." Cross's voice whispered through the speakers. "Run the test again," Kaney ordered, his voice tight with disbelief. Lyra pulled her hand away, then touched Captain Morrison's arm. Again, frost formed and melted. Again, he remained alive. She touched his face, his chest, his other hand. Each time the same thing happened. Cold, frost, but no death. "How?" she whispered. Captain Morrison looked at her with gentle eyes. "I do not know," he said. "But I think you are not the monster they have told you that you are." Tears ran down Lyra's face inside her visor. For 23 years she had believed she was a creature of death, cursed to kill everything she touched. But here was proof that she was wrong. Here was someone who could survive her touch, someone who could see her as more than a weapon. "Take him to the science lab," Dr. Cross's voice commanded. "I want to run every test we have, and bring Lyra too. I need to understand what just happened." As the guards led them away, Captain Morrison looked back at Lyra. "Do not give up hope," he said quietly. "This changes everything." Lyra did not know what he meant, but for the first time in her life, she felt something other than despair. She felt the beginning of hope, small and fragile but real. Maybe, just maybe, she was not the cursed monster she had always believed herself to be. Dr. Helena Cross stood in her laboratory, staring at the test results displayed on her screens. She had been the chief scientist of the Galatian Empire for 15 years, but she had never seen anything like this. The human called Jake Morrison defied everything she knew about biology and physics. "Run the thermal scan again," she ordered her assistant. The machine hummed as it examined Jake, who sat calmly on the examination table. Unlike other prisoners, he was not chained down. There was no need. Where could he run to on a planet made of ice? "The results are the same, Doctor," her assistant reported. "His core body temperature is 98.6 degrees in their measurement system. That is much higher than any known species. His heart beats 72 times per minute, also faster than normal. His blood carries heat throughout his body at an incredible rate." Dr. Cross walked closer to Jake, careful not to get too near. Even though he had survived Lyra's touch, she was not ready to take risks with her own life. "How do your people survive, with such high body heat?" she asked him. Jake smiled, the same calm expression he had worn since his capture. "We come from a warm world," he said. "Our sun is very hot, and our planet receives much more heat than yours does. Our bodies adapted to handle high temperatures. But that should make you weaker against cold, not stronger," Dr. Cross said, confused. "You should have frozen faster than other species, not slower." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But humans are good at adapting. We have lived through ice ages on our world, times when the temperature dropped far below normal. Some of our ancestors survived by learning to keep their body heat even in the coldest conditions." Dr. Cross made notes on her tablet. She had studied Lyra's power for years, trying to understand how it worked. The girl's touch drained heat and life force from any living thing, freezing them solid in seconds. But somehow this human's internal heat production was strong enough to fight back. "I want to test his limits," she told her assistant. "Bring Lyra here." 20 minutes later, Lyra entered the laboratory wearing her full protective suit. She looked at Jake through her visor, and he nodded to her like they were old friends. Dr. Cross found their easy interaction strange. Most people feared Lyra, but this human seemed comfortable around her. "Touch him again," Dr. Cross ordered. "I want to monitor what happens to both of you." Lyra walked to Jake and pulled off her glove. She placed her bare hand on his arm, and immediately the laboratory's sensors began recording data. Frost formed on Jake's skin at the point of contact, spreading about 2 inches before stopping. His body temperature dropped slightly, but his heart kept beating steadily. "Interesting," Dr. Cross muttered, watching the displays. "Lyra, your power output is the same as always, but it is not spreading through his body the way it should." "How does it feel?" Lyra asked Jake quietly. "Cold," he replied with a small laugh. "Like touching ice, but not painful. I can feel my body fighting against it, keeping the cold from reaching my heart." Dr. Cross noticed something else on her monitors. "Lyra, your power level is actually decreasing slightly while you touch him. It is as if his body heat is fighting back against your cold." They held the contact for 30 seconds. Then Lyra pulled her hand away. Jake's skin was red where she had touched him, but it quickly returned to normal color as his blood flow restored warmth to the area. "Again," Dr. Cross commanded. "Touch his face this time." Lyra hesitated. Touching someone's face seemed more personal, more intimate than touching an arm, but Jake nodded encouragingly, so she reached out and placed her palm against his cheek. The same thing happened. Frost formed, spread a short distance, then stopped. But this time, Dr. Cross noticed something new on her instruments. "Your brain activity is changing," she told Lyra. "The neural patterns that control your power are different when you touch him compared to other subjects." "What does that mean?" Lyra asked. "I am not sure yet," Dr. Cross admitted. "But it suggests that your power recognizes something different about his biology. It is not trying as hard to drain his life force." Over the next few hours they ran test after test. Each time the results were the same. Jake could survive Lyra's touch indefinitely, though prolonged contact did make him tired and cold. Dr. Cross discovered that his body produced heat faster than Lyra's power could drain it away. "This should not be possible," she muttered to herself. "Every other species dies within seconds." During a break between tests, Jake asked Dr. Cross a question that surprised her. "How long has Lyra been your prisoner?" "She is not a prisoner," Dr. Cross replied automatically. "She serves the Empire willingly." Jake looked at Lyra, who had removed her helmet to drink some water. Even without the protective gear, she was careful not to touch anything living. "Does it look like she serves willingly to you?" Dr. Cross followed his gaze and really looked at Lyra for the first time in years. The young woman's face was pale and sad, her eyes empty of hope. She moved like someone who carried a great weight on her shoulders. "She is necessary for our security," Dr. Cross said, but her voice sounded less certain than before. "What kind of security requires forcing someone to kill against their will?" Jake asked quietly. The question made Dr. Cross uncomfortable. She had always focused on the science of Lyra's power, not the ethics of how it was used. She changed the subject. "Back to the tests. I want to try something different," she announced. "Jake, I want you to hold Lyra's hand for exactly 60 seconds while I monitor both of you." Lyra looked nervous. "What if something goes wrong? What if I hurt him?" "You will not," Jake said confidently. "I trust you." Those 3 words hit Lyra like a physical blow. No one had ever said they trusted her before. She stared at Jake with wide eyes, then slowly removed both of her gloves. They joined hands like 2 normal people might do. Frost appeared on Jake's skin, but he did not pull away. Dr. Cross watched her instruments carefully, recording everything. "Fascinating," she whispered. "Lyra's power output is stabilizing at exactly the level Jake's body can handle. It is as if your abilities are balancing each other out." As the 60 seconds passed, something unexpected happened. Both Lyra and Jake began to relax. The tension left their faces, and they both seemed calmer than before. "How do you feel?" Dr. Cross asked when the test ended. "Better," Lyra said with surprise. "More in control of my power than I have ever felt." "I feel good too," Jake added. "Not tired like before. Actually, I feel stronger." Dr. Cross stared at her data in amazement. Instead of draining each other, prolonged contact seemed to help. Both of them find balance. Jake's natural heat production stabilized Lyra's cold power, while her cooling effect helped regulate his high body temperature. "This is unprecedented," she said. "You are not just immune to each other's effects, you are actually helping each other." Over the following days, Dr. Cross continued her research while Jake and Lyra spent more time together. She placed them in adjacent cells with a controlled barrier between them so they could talk safely. Through their conversations, Dr. Cross learned more about human biology and culture. Jake told Lyra about Earth's seasons, how temperatures changed throughout the year. He described humans swimming in warm oceans and also surviving in frozen mountains. Their adaptability was remarkable. "Your people sound amazing," Lyra said during one of their talks. "I wish I could see your world." "Maybe someday you will," Jake replied. But Dr. Cross knew that would never happen. Commander Caney had already made his decision about what to do with the humans. On the 5th day of testing, Dr. Cross made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in her analysis of human and glacian DNA, she found something impossible. Buried in both species' genetic codes were markers that suggested a common origin millions of years ago. "It cannot be," she whispered, running the analysis again and again. But the results were clear. Humans and glacians were related, distant cousins who had evolved on different worlds from the same ancient ancestors. Dr. Cross realized that Lyra's power was not meant to kill. It was an incomplete evolutionary trait, designed to work with compatible species. Jake's immunity was not an accident. It was proof that humans and glacians belonged together. But when she tried to report her findings to Commander Caney, he refused to listen. "I do not care about ancient history," he said coldly. "These humans are too dangerous to let live. Their resistance to our weapons makes them a threat. I am ordering the destruction of their home world." Dr. Cross felt her blood turn cold. "You cannot destroy an entire planet based on fear." "I can and I will," Caney replied. "And to make sure no one learns about human immunity, the prisoner Jake Morrison will be executed tomorrow." That night, Dr. Cross sat in her laboratory, staring at her research. She had spent her career serving the Empire without question, but now she faced a choice. She could stay silent and watch as genocide destroyed humanity, or she could act. For the first time in her life, Dr. Cross decided that science was more important than politics. She began planning how to warn Jake and Lyra about what was coming. She did not know if they could escape, but she had to try. The future of two species might depend on it. Dr. Helena Cross waited until the night shift began before making her move. The crystal sanctum was quieter after dark, with fewer guards patrolling the frozen corridors. She walked carefully through the halls, carrying a small device that would disable the security cameras for exactly 3 minutes. She reached Jake's cell first. He was sitting on the ice bench, looking out through the small window at the frozen landscape beyond. When he saw her approach, he stood up calmly. "Dr. Cross," he said quietly. "You look worried." "I am more than worried," she replied, keeping her voice low. "Commander Caney plans to execute you tomorrow morning. After that, he will send the Glacian fleet to destroy your homeworld." Jake's face went pale, but his voice remained steady. "How many ships?" 200 war vessels, Dr. Cross said. "Enough to turn your planet into a ball of ice. He believes that humans are too dangerous to let live because of your resistance to our weapons. And Lyra? She will be forced to return to her old life as a weapon. Caney thinks that if no one knows about your immunity, the fear of her power will remain useful." Jake closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with new determination. "We have to warn Earth. My people need time to prepare their defenses. Dr. Cross activated her device and the security cameras in the corridor went dark. She quickly used her access codes to open Jake's cell door. I can give you 3 minutes before the cameras come back online. The communication array from your ship is being held in Storage Bay 7, 3 levels down. What about Lyra? I will get her, Dr. Cross promised. But you need to move now. Jake stepped out of his cell and grabbed Dr. Cross by the shoulders. Why are you helping us? Because my research proves that humans and glacians are related species, she said urgently. Destroying your people would be like destroying part of ourselves. It is wrong, and I cannot let it happen. Jake nodded and ran toward the stairwell that led to the lower levels. Dr. Cross watched him disappear, then hurried to Lyra's chamber. The young woman was sitting on her bed, still wearing her protective suit even though she was alone. Dr. Cross? Lyra said, surprised to see her. What are you doing here so late? We have to leave right now, Dr. Cross said, opening Lyra's door. Commander Caney plans to kill Jake tomorrow and use you to destroy his homeworld. Lyra stood up quickly. I will not do it. I will not kill billions of innocent people. Then we need to help Jake escape, Dr. Cross said. He is trying to reach the communication array from his ship. If he can send a warning to Earth, his people might have a chance. But where can we go? Lyra asked as they hurried through the corridors. This is an ice planet. There is nowhere to hide. Jake's ship, Dr. Cross replied. If we can reach it and get the engines working, we might be able to escape to neutral space. They made their way down through the crystal sanctum, avoiding the main corridors where guards might see them. Dr. Cross used her knowledge of the building's layout to guide them through maintenance passages and service tunnels. As they reached the lower levels, they heard the sound of fighting echoing through the halls. Laser blasts and shouting voices suggested that Jake had been discovered. This way, Dr. Cross said, leading Lyra towards Storage Bay 7. They arrived to find Jake pinned down behind a stack of equipment crates. 6 Glacian guards were shooting at him with ice weapons that would freeze him solid if they hit. Jake was using a metal panel as a shield, but he could not reach the communication array on the other side of the room. I have an idea, Lyra said quietly. She began removing her protective gloves. Wait, Dr. Cross warned. If you touch the wrong thing, you could kill Jake too. No, Lyra replied with new confidence. I understand my power better now. Jake taught me that I can choose what to freeze and what to leave alone. Before Dr. Cross could stop her, Lyra stepped into the storage bay. The guards turned their weapons toward her, but she was ready. She reached out and touched the nearest weapon, freezing it solid in the guard's hands. Then she touched the floor, creating a sheet of ice that made 2 more guards slip and fall. Jake saw his chance and rolled toward the communication array while the guards were distracted. He reached the device and began working on it quickly, his fingers moving over the controls with practiced skill. Stop them, one of the guards shouted into his radio. The prisoners are escaping. More guards began arriving from other parts of the sanctum. Lyra continued using her power in ways she had never tried before. Instead of killing, she froze weapons, created ice walls for protection, and made the floor too slippery for the guards to stand on. I need 30 seconds, Jake called out as he worked on the communication array. Dr. Cross picked up one of the frozen weapons and tried to figure out how to use it. She had never been in a fight before, but she pointed it at the approaching guards and pressed what she hoped was the trigger. Nothing happened because the weapon was too cold to function. The weapon is frozen, she said helplessly. That is the point, Lyra replied, touching another guard's equipment. They cannot fight us if their weapons do not work. But more guards kept coming, and some of them had backup weapons. The situation was becoming desperate when Jake finally got the communication array working. Earth Command, this is Captain Jake Morrison. He spoke into the device. Emergency message. The Glacian Empire plans to attack Earth with 200 ships. Prepare all planetary defenses. I repeat, prepare for invasion. The message transmitted successfully, but before Jake could send more details, a voice boomed through the storage bay. Enough. Commander Caney entered with 20 more guards, all carrying weapons that could not be frozen. These were plasma weapons that generated their own heat. "You have caused enough trouble," Caney said coldly. "Surrender now, or we will kill all of you." Jake moved to stand beside Lyra, and something unexpected happened. When they were close, together Lyra's ice power and Jake's body heat began to interact in a new way. The air around them shimmered and a thin mist formed. "Stay back," Lyra warned the guards. "I do not want to hurt anyone." "You cannot hurt us all," Caney replied. "There are too many of us." But as Jake and Lyra moved closer together, the mist around them grew thicker. Dr. Cross realized what was happening. Their combined abilities were creating a localized weather system, a small storm that was growing stronger by the moment. "Fascinating," she whispered. "Their powers are amplifying each other." Jake reached out and took Lyra's hand. The moment their skin touched, the mist exploded outward in all directions. The temperature in the storage bay began dropping rapidly, but in a controlled way that did not kill anyone. Instead, the guards found their movement slowing as the cold sapped their strength. "Impossible," Caney gasped as frost formed on his uniform. The storm continued to grow, spreading beyond the storage bay into the corridors of the Crystal Sanctum. Emergency alarms began ringing as the building's systems detected the sudden temperature changes. "We need to reach the ship," Jake said through the mist. "Can you maintain this while we move?" "I think so," Lyra replied. "But I have never tried anything like this before." Together they began walking toward the exit, their combined power creating a protective barrier around them and Dr. Cross. The Faibio guards tried to follow, but the cold made them too slow and weak to keep up. As they made their way through the sanctum, other prisoners in the building began to realize what was happening. Word spread quickly that someone was fighting back against the Glacian Empire. Some of the braver prisoners began breaking out of their own cells, following the trail of the storm. "They are starting a rebellion," Dr. Cross said with amazement. "Good," Jake replied. "Your empire has kept too many people prisoner for too long." They reached the main hangar where Jake's ship was being held. The New Horizon looked damaged but repairable. However, between them and the ship stood Commander Caney with 50 guards, all wearing special thermal suits that protected them from the cold. "This ends now," Caney announced. "Kill the human and bring me Lyra. She will pay for this betrayal." Jake squeezed Lyra's hand tighter. "Are you ready to try something we have never done before?" "With you, I am ready for anything," she replied. Together they prepared to face their greatest challenge yet. The fate of two worlds depended on whether they could master their combined power in time to stop Commander Caney and save both Earth and the prisoners of the Crystal Sanctum. Commander Caney raised his plasma weapon, pointing it directly at Jake's chest. The 50 guards behind him did the same, their thermal suits making them look like metal monsters in the hangar's dim light. The air around Jake and Lyra still shimmered, with cold mist, but it would not stop plasma fire. "You have 10 seconds to surrender," Caney announced. "After that, I kill the human and drag you back to your chamber, Lyra." Jake looked at Lyra through the swirling mist. Her face was calm, but he could see determination in her eyes that had not been there a week ago. She was no longer the frightened prisoner who had killed his crew members. She had become something new, something powerful. "Do you trust me?" she asked quietly. "With my life," Jake replied without hesitation. Lyra smiled, and for the first time since Jake had known her, it was a smile of hope instead of sadness. She squeezed his hand tighter, and suddenly the mist around them began to spin faster. "Time is up," Caney said, pulling the trigger of his weapon. But as the plasma bolt flew toward them, something amazing happened. The spinning mist around Jake and Lyra suddenly expanded into a massive wall of controlled ice and wind. The plasma bolt hit the wall and was absorbed harmlessly, its energy scattered into the air. The other guards opened fire, but their shots met the same fate. The wall of ice and wind moved like it was alive, protecting Jake and Lyra while growing larger and stronger. "What is happening?" Dr. Cross whispered from behind a cargo container where she had taken cover. Jake and Lyra stood in the center of the storm they had created, their hands joined and their powers flowing together perfectly. Where Jake's natural heat met Lyra's controlled cold, they created something neither could achieve alone. They were controlling the weather itself. Impossible, Caney snarled. No one can control that much power. You are wrong, Lyra called, out through the wind. This is what my power was meant for. Not to kill, but to create balance. The storm continued to grow, but instead of becoming destructive, it became protective. Jake and Lyra learned to direct it with their thoughts and feelings. Where they wanted warmth, the air became comfortable. Where they needed barriers, ice, walls formed. Where they wanted to stop the guards, the ground became too slippery to walk on. Commander Caney tried to advance through the storm, but each step became harder than the last. His thermal suit protected him from the cold, but it could not help him walk on the smooth ice that formed under his feet. Retreat to the upper levels, he ordered his guards. We will use the ship weapons to destroy the hangar. But as the guards tried to leave, they found their path blocked. Other prisoners had broken free from their cells and were fighting Glacian soldiers throughout the Crystal Sanctum. The rebellion that had started with Jake and Lyra's escape was spreading to every level of the building. Your empire is built on fear, Jake shouted to Kane through the wind. But fear only works when people have no hope. We have given them hope. Caney's face twisted with rage. He activated a device on his belt, and his voice echoed through speakers all over the sanctum. All units converge on the main hangar. Use lethal force on all prisoners and execute the human immediately. Within minutes, the sound of running feet filled the corridors around the hangar. Hundreds of guards were coming, armed with the most powerful weapons the Glacian Empire possessed. There are too many of them, Dr. Cross said fearfully. Even your combined power cannot stop an entire army. Jake looked at Lyra, and she nodded. They both understood what they had to do. We are not just going to stop them, Lyra said with quiet confidence. We are going to show them a better way. They walked forward together, still surrounded by their protective storm. As they approached Commander Caney, he raised his weapon. Again, but this time something different happened. Instead of creating a barrier to stop his attack, Jake and Lyra reached out with their combined power and touched the weapon itself. The plasma gun did not freeze or melt. Instead, it simply stopped, working, as if all the energy had been drained from it peacefully. Caney stared at the useless device in shock. How did you do that? We took away the heat that powers it, Jake explained. But we did not destroy it, we just made it harmless. They continued forward, and with each step, their power grew stronger and more controlled. When the army of guards burst into the hangar, Jake and Lyra were ready for them. Instead of fighting, they did something no one expected. They embraced each other. The moment Jake's arms went around Lyra, and she held him close, their combined power exploded outward in a wave of perfectly controlled temperature. Every weapon in the hangar stopped working. Every guard found themselves unable to move as their muscles became too cold to function properly. But none of them were hurt or killed. This is impossible, Caney gasped, falling to his knees as the cold made him too weak to stand. No, Dr. Cross said, stepping out from her hiding place with wonder in her voice. This is evolution. This is what they were meant to become together. The wave of power continued to spread beyond the hangar, throughout the entire Crystal Sanctum. Everywhere it went, weapons stopped working and violence became impossible. But prisoners found themselves warmed and strengthened, while their guards were left helpless but unharmed. In the sudden silence that followed, Jake activated his communication device again. Earth Command, this is Captain Morrison. The immediate threat has been neutralized. The Glacian fleet will not be attacking. Repeat, Earth is safe. But he was not done. He changed the frequency to broadcast to all Glacian ships in the system. Attention, Glacian vessels. This is Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. I am speaking to you from your own Crystal Sanctum, where your weapons have been rendered useless. We do not wish to fight you. We wish to offer you something better. Commander Caney tried to speak but found his voice too weak from the cold. He could only listen as Jake continued. Dr. Helena Cross of your own scientific corps has discovered that humans and Glacians share common ancestors. We are related species who were separated long ago. Your weapon, Lyra Voss, is not meant to be a weapon at all. She is meant to be a bridge between our peoples. Jake helped Lyra to the communication device. She spoke with a clear, strong voice that carried no fear. I am Lyra Voss, she said. For 23 years you used me to kill and terrorize others. But I was never meant to bring death. My power, combined with human warmth, creates life and balance. We can work together to heal the damage that fear and hatred have caused. Dr. Cross stepped forward and added her voice to the broadcast. I have spent years studying Lyra's abilities. Combined with human biology, they can regulate temperature, create perfect weather conditions, and even heal injuries caused by extreme cold or heat. Together, our species could transform entire worlds, making them suitable for life. The response came quickly from the Glacian fleet. Ship after ship reported that their weapons had also stopped working, affected by the wave of power that had spread from the sanctum. But instead of panic, there was curiosity in their voices. "This is Admiral Frost of the Glacian Third Fleet," came a voice over the radio. "We are detecting massive energy readings from the surface. What exactly are you proposing?" Jake and Lyra exchanged a look, then Jake answered, "We propose an alliance. Humans and Glacians working together to explore the galaxy, not to conquer it, but to help it flourish. Your ice powers and our heat generation could terraform dead worlds, creating new homes for any species that needs them." Over the following hours, delegations from both species met in the main chamber of the Crystal Sanctum. Commander Caney, still weakened but no longer in command, watched in amazement as his own people negotiated with the humans he had planned to destroy. The agreement they reached was simple but revolutionary. The Glacian Empire would release all prisoners and end its aggressive expansion. In return, humans would share their technology and work with Glacians to develop their combined abilities. Lyra would no longer be a prisoner or a weapon. She would be the first ambassador of the new alliance, working with other humans to develop the potential of their joined powers. Already, 3 more humans from Jake's crew had been found to have some resistance to her abilities, suggesting that the compatibility was not limited to just Jake. The final scene took place on the observation deck of a new type of ship, built jointly by human and Glacian engineers. Jake and Lyra stood together, watching as mixed crews worked side by side to prepare for their first joint mission to a dead world that they would bring back to life. For the first time in her life, Lyra was not wearing protective clothing. She held Jake's hand freely, their powers balanced and controlled. Around them, other humans and Glacians worked together, no longer enemies but partners in the greatest adventure either species had ever undertaken. "Are you ready?" Jake asked, as their ship prepared to jump to faster than light speed. "I have been ready my whole life," Lyra replied with a smile. "I just did not know what I was waiting for." As their ship jumped into hyperspace, heading toward a galaxy full of possibilities, Lyra finally understood her purpose. She had never been cursed. She had been preparing for this moment, when 2 lost species would find each other and become something greater than either could be alone.